everyone, Lisa here. We're here today with Digger Jones. He's a musician based out of Toronto, and we're going to learn a little bit about him, and he's going to treat us to a performance of some of his music. So tell us about yourself.
Well, my name is Digger Jones. I'm a Canadian musician. I was born in Toronto, grew up in Vancouver, moved back to Toronto. Now, the name Digger Jones is not your usual name, Digger. Where does that come from, right? So I actually got that. I didn't give myself that name. I was given that name at birth. And the reason why I was a premature baby, I almost died, I was a blue baby, and supposedly the story goes, my family was praying all night for me. The doctor left, went home, he said it's a lost cause. And at 5 in the morning, he gets a call that I slowly started breathing. So he runs into the room, the nurses are there, and supposedly my grandma, who had been like crying and praying all night, who was a little delusional by that time, was holding a rosary and started crying and said, "He's such a digger." And my family looked at her and was like, "What did you say?" 30 years later, I still get Christmas cards saying, you know, "Merry Christmas, Digger." So I decided to make that my stage name and run with it.
So you mentioned your childhood. How has that helped shape who you are and the music you create?
Sure. So growing up, my family didn't have the most money. We weren't abject poverty, but, we struggled. And with that being said, when you're young and you're poor, you find avenues to stay out of trouble. And for me, the two greatest things in the world were sports and music. And you'd actually be surprised, for a lot of musicians, they're not that much different. The world of music is very energy based, and it's very, it's kind of like the ebb and flow of sports games, especially in hip hop, right? And so I came from, a little bit of a dysfunctional family, so I just used music as my outlet when I was small. And, I had kind of a tough upbringing. I went to jail once. I'm not a criminal, but it was a fight for self-defense. It got pretty serious. I was also involved in high school, I was involved with a gang. I thought I was cool like every kid, and I'm going to join this thing until, people get badly injured, and then all of a sudden, when people are hunting for me, I was like, "Oh, I'm a musician actually," and with that being said, when something really bad happens to somebody's life, they turn to the thing that was there at the beginning, that they kind of fell away from. And for me, that was always music.
How did you get your start in music?
Great question. So, young, I saw my family were phenomenal musicians that never made it. Both of them, I would come home and see my parents playing, music, bass guitar, piano, and they're phenomenal. So even better than some of the stuff I see on TV. But because they didn't know the industry and because of their own issues, they never made it. And for me, that was a big, motivator, inspiration. Am I good at music? I thought. So my first day in choir in grade 4, I walked in and I started singing, and they put me with the girls because they didn't know that, and they just heard my voice, and the person doing the audition just sent me with the sopranos and didn't even look up to see who I was. And then everyone laughed when we walked in, and I was the only guy with the girls. And that's when I realized that, maybe I have a chance in music. I have a high octave range, and because of just genetics, I was able to play music. And here's the thing, I never was formally trained until almost in university. So I did everything by ear and improvisation and by feeling. To me, music was an art, right? And then later I realized, no, it's also math. And if you can embrace both, then you become a great musician.
So you play the rock rap genre. How did you decide that was the right genre for you?
So growing up, because I played a lot of hip hop, because I played a lot of sports, hip hop is, a part of sports. And I loved Tupac Shakur, and I loved Big L and Nas. So the way that these guys rap, not only were they somewhat revolutionary, and we're talking about things that you'd never hear in a rock song, right? I love the crispness also of the producers, the ability to make beats. And then I realized, I love the power of rock, the instrumentation, the actual musicality of rock is profound. But for me, sometimes I don't know what they're saying. You know, it's too kind of dreamlike, the lyrics. As in hip hop, it was very poetic and very pungent. And then I realized, well, why can't you mix the both? And that's what kind of, the first band I ever heard that was POD. And they're a band from San Diego. And they were at about the same time as Rage Against the Machine, right? But they were a little bit more Spanish influenced. And I heard them and I was like, yeah, you can actually rap over rock. And then Linkin Park came out the next year. And it was like, wow. They had basically perfected the ability to bring a hipster in the same concert as a gangster, right? And that's when I realized that I wanted to do rock rap.
What does it mean to you to be a Canadian musician?
I'm so proud to be Canadian. Digger Jones, I hope it's become synonymous with Canadian music. But to me, it also means a struggle. Because when you're Canadian, for some reason, not only in the music industry, but also in the movie industry, you're automatically synonymous with amateur. And it's unfortunate. I don't know what happened with the stigma or the lack of funding or the systemic lack of infrastructure, but Canadians have to work a lot harder to be known internationally because of, that big figure down south that, has all the talent and all the facilities. So obviously there's exceptions, Justin Bieber and Celine Dion, some of the greatest people that are Canadian. But for the most part, a lot of Canadian talent has to, number one, either do it themselves in their own team and come out in their own avenue that catches people by surprise, or they have to be the best in the world to be noticed. And so for me as a Canadian musician, I would never sell out. No matter how hard it is, I would prefer to come out and to show people that Canada still has that fundamental rock. In the 90s, Canada was known for our rock. Every other rock alternative band was Canadian. And so that's what I would like to just be, the new generation of awesome Canadian rockers.
So who are some of your inspirations that helped shape your music?
That's a great question. So I guess first of all, I'll start off, because I first started off with hip hop. Because I played sports young, I like dance and I like hip hop. So at the time when I first listened to hip hop was Coolio. I know this is a throwback, Gangster's Paradise. I've had this in my garage since 1993. I just found it and it's awesome. Just remembering Coolio and Gangster's Paradise, even though it was a one-hit wonder, that was a lot of people, their first interaction with hip hop, right? Because it became mainstream at that time. It wasn't so urban or kind of dangerous. Next, I'd say Tupac and Nas, both for lyrical geniuses and both because everyone was playing that on the sports field, right? That was the stuff you played. But when I came home, it was rock. And it was my whole family. Not only, obviously my dad loved the classicals, right? But I always thought that the classical musicians got all the attention. Everyone's always talking about them and wearing their shirts like they're the gods of music. But for me, musically, the newer bands were actually more talented, right? And what I mean with that is, I'll do this in order. I already talked about POD. I love them for rock rap. But there was a Canadian band that was one of the first it was the first album I ever bought, was that album right there. And that's Our Lady Peace. And they've had about 10 CDs up until now. But when this CD came out, I kid you not, every single kid in my school rushed to go buy it. It was like, I don't know it was a proud thing that a Canadian band had finally made it, since Rush, had finally made it international. And so I wanted to emulate myself after this band, not only with the high-pitched vocals of Rain Maida, but later on, like a decade later, after I'd listened to them and loved them, I found out they were Canadian from Toronto. They had went to UFT and everything, and I was like, oh my God. And then I actually ended up meeting his brother. And so this, to me, was probably one of the greatest, I guess, examples of a Canadian band that stayed Canadian, that didn't go too poppy to sell, in Britain or in America, that kept to its Canadian roots. And they were able to remain successful on sheer talent. And then there's a couple other bands after them, because every band has its ups and downs. These two bands also influenced me, Coldplay and Dream Theater. Now, Coldplay obviously has great songs for decades, but I still like their first album because it was their first. It was the thing that made them successful from nowhere. It was mostly him on his acoustic guitar on a lot of these songs. And if you can make it famous from just your acoustic guitar, then you're a very good band. The next would be Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater is American, but they are considered probably the greatest underground metal band of all time. It's funny, they don't go on the radio very much, but they have more fans than radio people. Now, Dream Theater, they have a lot of talent and a lot of artwork. And the part of them that I like is that for them, everything was perfect. The music, the artwork, everything, and it was because of the budget. And last is myself. Close Encounter, I honestly actually will listen to the music that I've already created, and it actually inspires me to keep on going on the same route I am. Because, I find a lot of musicians, obviously you have to adapt with the times, and you have to change your style to go with the times. But sometimes bands or musicians are pressured to change, and they lose all their fans that have loved them for a decade on what they do. So I actually will listen to my music on the stuff that people love, and I'll actually try to remain somewhat consistent on all my stuff.
You consider yourself to be a solo artist. Why do you prefer that to creating a band?
That's a great question, and I think every musician needs to know this. When you're in a band, obviously it's good. There's the camaraderie, there's extra help from funding, but there's also babysitting. And what I mean is, people show up late, people have their stuff, which is okay, you can always accommodate that. But the hardest part about being in the band is when it just becomes a clash of egos. When people are talented musically, but it seems like everyone wanted to be their own personal solo artist, and you put 5 solo artists in a band together, and then you just get, nobody wants to be, a captain, or nobody's willing to be a pirate, or a chief or an Indian. Nobody wants to actually be a worker, right? So I've had bands before, and I've had to fire guys because no matter how good they are musically, first of all, they can't play the same thing that they did before, or they change it and make it so complicated that it actually becomes they're not doing it for the fans anymore. They're doing it for themselves, which is not the way music is meant to be. So what I found out personally, when I hire a session musician who's a phenomenal musician, he'll play it better than the person that I've been jamming with for 6 months, and he hasn't even met me. He'll just come in, he'll have the MP3s, he'll listen to it, he already has a nice lead line, he knows the lead sheets, he sits down as a professional musician, plays it perfectly, and there's no strings attached. And if I can find people like that in every city and just tour as my own image and keep the revenue for myself and just allocate it out to other great musicians, a part of me thinks, why would you ever want to have to babysit?
Where do you see yourself as a musician down the road?
Well, right now, I'm just starting. I'm not signed, and we don't really have the capital or the investment yet. But I have people interested in our music, especially, our website. I get so many people looking at my stuff. And my stuff, to be honest, was all mixed by myself. If I can do this much by myself, imagine when we totally get the full package together. We're just going to go to record labels and eventually get signed. And my music right now is online. So I personally do not want to just go into bars and scream at people that are drunk for the next 15 years. A lot of bands have made it like that, but a lot of bands have not made it like that, and they end up hating music because of that. And I realized in 2017, there are so many markets for music. Movies, commercials, weddings, festivals, DJing, bars and clubs, online, CD sales. There's so many different ways that you can get your music out there, right? When it's fully mixed and mastered. Then it goes on the radio. So with that being said, I want to basically have a small tour in Toronto just to get the name and image out of Digger Jones. Then I want to go into the studio, fully do a perfect first album under the name Close Encounter and Digger Jones, and just release that online into the radio station. So instead of like going from the bars, which people thought you had to get fans, so many people know me in Toronto already. I don't have to scream in bars anymore. You know, I can literally just do it on a higher level, just put it into the people with the money and get it out there for people online.
What do you hope that fans will take away from your music?
Well, the biggest thing is the message. So the music is really good for emotions. But when it comes to your mind, you want to make sure that, for me personally, I find a lot of hip hop today just repeats the same thing over and over, and it actually dumbs people down, right? And for me, that wasn't what hip hop was supposed to be. It was supposed to enlighten you and to empower you with vocabulary to be able to make better decisions in your life, right? It was a form of education, right? So now what I want my music to be is somewhat of a fun educational tool for people. You know, obviously it's just fun to have fun to and party to, but at the end of the day, to still be able to sit at home and read the lyrics and be like, wow, how did he say that like that? And so for me, it's mostly inspiration. And, you know, obviously coming from, you know, I'm part native, I'm a Canadian, there'll be some a little bit of political side to it. There'll be a little bit of romantic ballads, you know, a little bit of hip hop energy. But for the most part, all of it is just the message.
What would you tell someone who wants to get into the music industry?
Most people would joke right now and say don't, right? And I've heard that a million times. I would actually say really, really consider, first of all, if you're good. Because if you're just not that good, it's one of the steepest mountains in the world to climb, right? So if you're not that good, and if you have something that you're better at, do that. With that being said, if you go home and you love playing music, and that feeling that you had when you first played music alone in your room, and you were like free, and it was like, oh my God, I could do this every day for the rest of my life. And you had your mom or your brother come in the room and they're like, wow, that's the first starting of music. And please never let the industry take that away from you, because what you want to keep is that feeling when you're playing in front of 30,000 people or you're online with 1 million people. You want to keep that feeling, because that feeling right there is what the audience wants you to give them, right? So what I'm going to say here, the music industry is full of assholes. And, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It's run by people who don't know music, who would make everything 3 or 4 chords so that they can make everyone just a commercial tool. And that's unfortunate, but luckily, Canadians are smarter than that. And we seem to know that, yes, you still have to simplify your stuff to market it, but it comes to the music. And so I'm going to say this to any rising artists: if you're good and you love music, then hone your skill, better your chops alone, or go get lessons until you feel like, yeah, I'm comfortable. But never let somebody who doesn't know the music tell you that the industry has to only do it like this. Do your research yourself. Go and understand the music industry before you think you can just walk in with great chops. Because I know great musicians who are just buskers on the TTC, or just people that, you know, play at Grossman's downtown 5 nights a week, and they barely make a living. And they're better than people that I've seen on MTV. What I'm going to say is learn the industry. Better your chops till you feel comfortable, but then learn what is an EPK, who is an agent, what is a publicist to, who are the best people to get my music to, what's mixing and mastering music, and how important that is. Because only then, when you become a great musician, when you've actually understand your image and you've perfectly put that together, then you come out in the industry.
So when can people hear your music? Do you have concerts coming up?
Sure. So right now we are going into the studio. This year is when we fully mix and master our first album. We have been playing shows, you know, in Toronto, small little bars on College and around, and it's good, but it only goes so far when you don't have very much material to sell. So, what we're going to be doing this year, going into the studio, bettering ourselves as, you know, as my backup band, and most of my stuff will be online. Now, when I say that, you can type in DJ Digger Jones into Google. You will find me on YouTube, you will find me on Star Now, you will find me Reverb Nation, and you will find our website, which is kind of an unusual name, but it's Yeti, Y-E-T-I, Lynden, that's my real name, L-Y-N-D-E-N, at Wix, W-I-X. And you don't have to remember all that, just Google DJ Digger Jones, you'll find my YouTube, Facebook, all that stuff, and all the links are there to our band. And our upcoming concerts are changed every month to let you know what the next 6 months of concerts are.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being with us today, Digger. And we're going to get a sample of his music, so keep listening.
Story of a spirited dog from a small fishing village whose selfless and courageous deeds that led to him obtaining his most heroic title. Hi, I'm Nalini Raghunandan. I have always dreamt of writing a children's book, and I have finally realized that dream with the first book in an early reader series, Fanny the Champ. For upcoming events, please visit my website at fannythedog.com.
DJ Digger. It's better left unsaid. Better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. Better left unsaid. Like being watched by the feds. Say less so you might end up dead. My friend talks to girls like he spent. Clark Kent, I'm Superman. Lois Lane at the palm of my hand. Speed burst to Japan, bringing honor to the land. I keep my mouth shut, let my rhymes do the talking. If you a picture, man, you be walking. While the rappers be crawling to the coffins. Like a boss, man, I'm off this. DJ Digger. Like a boss, man, I'm off this. Better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. Better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. Never say too much, so I can peek in the clutch. My girls never get enough, cause I always stay above all the drama in the setup, making sure the pussy gets wet up. Know when to bounce, so stay, my mind never gets delayed. Let my moms do the talking. If you a picture, man, you be walking. While the rappers be crawling to their coffins. Like a boss, man, I'm off this. Never stoop to spread the dirt. I never show them when it hurts. When an argument arises, never leak my surprises. It's better left unsaid. 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 Baby girl, you make me feel fine, like a great, great sunrise. I'm just lost in your time. I just want you here by my side. Better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. Better left unsaid. It's better left unsaid. It's better left